Well, hello to niggas and niggas only. Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It a Bean. And honestly, we're going to get straight to it. So, today we are going to be talking around the election, but more so the results. I'm going to get a little personal this one and just kind of talk around my experience participating in this election a little bit more actively than I have years and years prior. But especially like as my role as a content creator this time around, and what that meant in terms of people who were watching my stuff, but then also this idea of mobilizing people too. Then ultimately going to move a little bit more into the some of the issues I have seen, some of the reactions I have seen, but also my own processing of it all, and then hopefully be able to leave out with some solutions. I'm fully unsurprised in terms of like how the election turned out, right? I'm unsurprised because I know how whiteness functions, I know how people function, but I can also name the context of where we were at too, right? There has been a consistent anti-intellectual movement that has been going on. There has been cultural antagonism that has been on an ultra high, and it's stuff that I wish more of us were able to articulate. And it's why I continue to say the intersection of culture and policy is exactly how we got to where we're at today. And I'm going to focus in a little bit more on like how young boys participated in this space and how we have kind of did not take heed soon enough. And I'll get into more of like the nitty gritty stuff. I have some political strategists coming on soon so we can really unpack some of the things that went wrong, some of the things that we need to do. But from a political and organizing lens, I think it'll be important to have a much more rounded out discussion. I think that's going to be a lot more fruitful from people that are here in Philly alone. So we're going to get into that a little later, but this episode will be primarily focused on my own personal musing. So I just want to like also name that caveat in between there too. Clearly, I was somebody who participated in this election, especially as a content creator and influencer, thought leader in terms of like what was going on. I say all of that because for me, my platform is primarily focused on ensuring like there are Black folks that are good. I'm steeped in the Black radical tradition, but not only that, a lot of my politics leans more into the abolitionist space. In that moment, I was like, cool, my abolitionist politic does not necessarily lend itself to the Democratic Party and making sure that Kamala Harris wins in a way that we need her to, right? And wanted her to, okay? And so for me, I had realized even in my critiques of her, there was a pushback of just like, maybe this is not the right time. Maybe this is not the right time. Maybe this is not the right time. And honestly, your Black excellence crowd, y'all got me. I'm not gonna lie, right? But that response also inspired hope. I'm not gonna lie either, right? And so part of me was still pessimistic because I'm just like, there ain't no way they put no Black women in this position. They're not. America is personally, I don't think America's ready for that, right? And there's all this talk going on, but I did not say America's not ready for it out of racism, because yes, there is that, but it was also like this growing cultural angst around the relationship that men have to women, right? And that piece is going to be really important as we like look at this and analyze more of the cultural and human piece that was going on here. And so when I'm participating in this space, there's obviously excitement. Like I'm able to work, get some partnerships with some different political PACs, but also being able to be hired by the Harris campaign in itself, right? I was able to see the rallies. I was able to go and have these conversations. I was able to shoot commercials. I was able to shoot digital ads. My face was pretty much everywhere in terms of how Pennsylvania is participating in this election cycle, right? That I understood because I was just like, I am still close enough to the people where if they see me, they're just like, oh, okay, you're going to inspire me to vote, which is true. I had multiple messages come out and be like, Marquise, like you inspired me to want to participate in this election a lot more. You helped contextualize some things. You were able to be informative on what was going on, right? And so for me, I live in a space where I like to analyze and see like what is going on, but I realized I was able to activate my base and actually my platform in a way that wasn't used before, right? I'm using this to ensure that Black people are taken care of first and foremost. That's the reason I was willing to lend my platform, okay? Um, but in lending my platform, there was part of it that I had to be a little bit more polished with how my critiques of Biden and Harris and Trump and white people at large were all kind of functioning, because I understood that messaging and to get, be on code with everybody else, that was important. So I'm not negating that, because there had to be strategy. This Black woman only had less than 100 days to like get it all together, which I think was played a pivotal role in like why she in part lost, right? But I don't think it was the sole thing. And so I definitely had a moment in time where I'm like looking at it and I'm like, oh, there are so many content creators that want to lend their voice, but I don't know how effective it is either, especially because I'm also a content creator that works in the space of service. So it's a little easier for me to kind of be involved in the community a lot more. And I'm like, I know my neighbors, I volunteer, I participate in different organizations in order to just ensure like our community is together. So I recognize my platform also goes beyond the digital. And that's important to also recognize as well, because I can be recognized on the street and people just be like, yo, I appreciate what you was doing. Right. And again, I live in Philly, so being able to like engage in those conversations, canvassed a couple of times, was able to talk to different organizers and different union members and stuff like that. And for me, that was important to kind of make sure I wasn't only living in my echo chamber. Right. There are things I know how to articulate. There are things that I understand. There are things I can theorize and predict in some cases. But in reality, it's also important that I am not in a space that puts me above others to speak for them, but at least I can elevate different voices and different excitement and different emotions, because theory is easy, practice will always be hard. And that, I think, is such an important piece I reflect on as a content creator, and I reflect on as an abolitionist, and I reflect on as a Black man walking in this space. And that colored my participation in this election cycle. I will always say, I don't trust government, but I understand that is a political necessity for our survival. That's why I participate in the electoral process. That's why I participate in local government and those in between, those midterm elections. All of those pieces are important to me, because I understand that if we are not participating, they are creating laws that do not benefit us in the long run, right? And that's why I participate, because I also understand that the rollbacks are going to start happening. I cannot be an activist. I cannot enact positive social change as easily if I have a government that can make it much more fundamentally difficult for me to be able to access those modes of change, whether that is protest, dissension, anything that may look like, right? And I kind of got a little intellectual and a little heady about it, but if I'm going to be fully honest, like leading into that election, I'm just like, all right, here's how we mobilize the people. Here's what we're going to do. But honestly, all these white people came out, women for Trump, white men for Trump, Republicans for Trump, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dog, y'all ain't fooling me with that nonsense. I know what it is to be smiled in the face and then also stabbed right in that back. Like, do not, I don't trust them far enough to be able to genuinely put that idea or their aspiration of power aside, because whiteness will usually prevail in that space. Now, I say I'm unsurprised, but I'm still angry, okay? And my anger is going to be in line with so many people, and I understand to direct my anger mostly towards the white people, because y'all gonna do what y'all do every single time, and I'm unsurprised. But there's also spaces where I'm like a little bit more frustrated with the Democratic Party at large. And the reality is, they can continue to talk to me, but they're not talking to working class people anymore, speaking above them, but also not even realizing how far away the working people are getting from the Democratic Party more and more. The Democratic Party is for the college elite. The Democratic Party has not been for working people, and that's the reality. And it's not that they haven't, right? They have put together protections for people who are in unions. They have put together protections that made sure that folks had equitable access to resources. These are all the things that working people benefit from. But the Democratic Party was unable to articulate, because those feelings were not validated in the ways in which it was as immediate as possible, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm just like, part of me also believes that so much of this election this time around was based in so much of like feeling and wanting to feel the impacts of politics versus like, oh, this has been here and this has been protecting me. And I did not know to equate that to the Democratic Party or progressive policy, right? And so if I'm fully keep it a bean, I'm like, dog, even when they were making like concession speeches and stuff like that, I'm like, yo, y'all keep moving with this message of it's going to be okay, but I don't think so. And that's the part that really, truly pisses me off, because I'm like, don't utilize this rhetoric of we are going to be okay when weeks prior, you're also talking around like he is a danger to America. I absolutely believe that he is a danger to the people. I absolutely believe that we are pretty much screwed with Senate, with the Supreme Court, with the presidency, and the House on the line. All of that is important to note because these are the people who make sure that we have policies that put protections around us. The reality is also that people don't even remember the fucking civil rights movements and civil safeties that are here for us. These are women's rights. These are queer rights. These are trans rights. This is rights for people who are differently abled. There are so many things that are wrapped up into here for poor people. Like, we really need to break down this class thing a lot more because the reality is this whole election can be definitely boiled down to economic anxiety and frustration met with cultural antagonism. It is a class stratification. That is really what is going on here, in my honest opinion. And some of this is so wrapped up in feelings, which I think is what we're going to get to a little bit more. And I don't deny those because that's what motivates us to go to the polls and vote. But I think Democrats absolutely missed the signs because they were so willing to negate the fact that so many people were not satisfied. Outside of polling, people genuinely were just not satisfied with what this government was doing, what Democrats were doing. And this gave Trump the easiest access to then posit himself as this man of change, as this arbiter of change. Hey, y'all, the Democratic Party is not doing what they need to do. So because they're not doing what they need to do, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. Because now he's the one who is gaining more support from non-white folks, from white folks, and all of that good stuff. Like, that's important. That's important to note. And more particularly, it's coming from uneducated people as well. So these are the people who don't even have as much access to the creme de la creme resources, or at least being able to benefit from the protections of class, right? That's also a reality. These are people who are thinking around their everyday struggle, their everyday livelihood, and just ensuring that they can get by. But right now, government is not helping them at all. People are frustrated more than ever. They also don't necessarily have anything to really stand on, right? And so when working people are upset with current conditions, they want to find that easiest way. They need to point to blame somebody. They're not going to blame that on Trump because he wasn't in office. They can feel the effects of the ghost of Trump when he was in office, but they're not immediately like, oh, well, Biden fixed X, Y, and Z issues for me. That's unable to be articulated, which I think is also like a failure on the Democratic side of everything too. But I think that's the piece that we need to make sure that we are cognizant of, which I'm going to get back to in a little bit. On some real shit, like, I don't blame black women for wanting to bow out, because honestly, in my first reaction, I said, it's honestly still fuck everybody else. And I know part of that's not productive because the reality is black folks only make up 12 to 13% of the US, right? And so I'm still under the impression of like, y'all know I'm niggas and niggas only first and foremost. So I'm going to make sure my people are okay. However, I'm also looking at this and I'm like, we going to make sure we all right, but we are going to have to do a hell of a job to make sure that we are coming together to ensure that we're protecting each other. Because the reality is there are going to be non-black people, people of color, who are actively going to engage in anti-blackness in their pursuit of whiteness. In their pursuit of whiteness, they are willing to shoot themselves in the foot because they want to aspire to be that 1%. And again, they want to aspire to be that 1%, which is never going to happen because guess what? You're still not white. You are still poor. Okay. But it's that thing, right? And so I look at it as black people as an entirety, and I'm like, y'all, I don't think we're really in the space of wanting to like save everybody anymore. Because frankly, everybody else gave us their ass to kiss. So I'm never going to fault a black person right now who is feeling like, nah, it's really fuck everybody else, because that's exactly what the rest of America told us. We're going to hold it down each and every time. And that's the piece, right? Like, I'm thinking around these civil rights movements. I think around Black Lives Matter. I think around the civil rights movement. I think around what happened with Rodney King. I'm thinking around all of these moments in history that we were able to push. The pandemic, George Floyd, all of this stuff allowed us to push policy to ensure that there are protections for black folks, which inherently helps everybody else. People benefit off of our labor, but people will be really quick to shit on us. But then when somebody needs something amplified, it's now suddenly, hey, black people, can you now lend your voice? The Democratic Party participates in it when they decided that they wanted to say, black folks, We need to make sure you get your black men there. Which, again, I still argue we don't need to worry about what we're doing. Y'all need to worry about what your other base is doing, because guess who you did not inspire to vote? Those white men who voted for Biden did not get up and vote for Kamala Harris. That's that piece that's there, right? And so we can name all of these things, and I think that's important to name. But I really, really want to think around a little bit more, is like, there is an issue, and I'm focusing on this one a little bit more because I am genuinely worried, but there's an issue of boyhood and manhood. And I say this because in this issue of boyhood and manhood, there is economic anxiety, there is a lack of education, and there is this lack of humanity because men have convinced themselves that they are being left behind, right? And I think those are three main points to hit in terms of how men are actively thinking around this election and the cultural piece around masculinity and men that led to these politics, right? Trump knew how to appeal to the angry man. And I want to name it like this because what they did not notice was thinking around the amount of people that were engaging in Kevin Samuels content, thinking around the amount of people who are engaging in Andrew Tate's content, thinking around the amount of people who are looking at Trump as somebody who validates the anger, right? Trump was able to craft this male identity that he was able to speak to those specific emotions, those emotions of being left behind, those emotions of not getting the things I was told I deserve. That is everything that men are thinking around. The idea of being a provider, making sure that we're in there. So you have to look at the content too. And I'm looking at it from more of a content creator standpoint because I'm like, there's something that we've been talking around it. The trad wife, dog, these are traditional values. The high value man, the nuclear family, men that need to be dominant. But the reality is less men are going to school. Less men are having advanced degrees. And even if we look at the exit polls, men who had degrees voted more Democrat than anything. Men who did not have degrees voted for Trump. There is a class and education issue that is going on. Okay. And that's the piece that is concerning because now at this point in time, if less men are deciding to go to college and less jobs that are able to be blue collar, that are able to, your factories, right? Your manufacturing companies, all of this means that there's a cap almost to what men are able to make. Because the reality is the skills that are needed to compete in this market today are your soft skills, emotional intelligence, trusting your team, being able to manage. These are skills that, frankly, men are lacking in more and more. Because guess what? We see these traits as feminine. We don't see these traits as this is what leaders need. But guess what? CEOs need to know how to delegate. They need to know how to talk to people, right? They need to know how to maintain relationships. Your people who work in development, your people who work in fundraising, your people who are in these corporate positions that were requiring you to be front-facing and people-facing. Your manager manages you. You're the worker bee, right? And so they're not paying you to think. You're just doing. And I worried about bringing this point up, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it with enough care. But if 37% of this country is college educated and a majority of this country is living in poverty, this class stratification is only going to get further and further and further away from each other. The thing is, and what worries me the most, is that culturally, media-wise, boys are consuming manosphere content. This is what they believe a man is supposed to be. This is what they believe a man is supposed to value. This is what is supposed to be mine based on what America told me I should have, based on what patriarchy told me I should have, based on what other men around me told me I should have. And I ain't getting none of that under Biden-Harris administration. And so when I look at all of this, I'm like, yo, there is this traditional patriarchal power and this ideal masculine identity that men are striving for but will not ever achieve. Because guess what? If women become the breadwinners, men now have to look at women in partnership. Men need to look at women as people in community because outside of just romance, do I respect women? Now, I think there's much more to say is like, I think there's a cultural resentment of women because women are being applauded. Women are now getting equal, not, well, let me not say fully equal footing because there's still hella discrimination that goes on, but women are moving towards a space of equity and equality, right? I'm not even adding on the layer of how race intersects with this, right? And so I'm looking at this and people are just like, well, you know what? At least women get their rights. At least queer LGBTQ rights are a thing, right? At least black people are getting something. Oh, immigrants are they're sending money to all these immigrants and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, y'all don't even realize like people who are here that you deem as immigrants cannot participate in this process. So once again, you're putting your energy towards a system that you believe was supposed to benefit you. But the manifestation is I'm going to turn my back on black people. I'm going to turn my back on women, femmes, everybody else that is not the default privileged identity. That to me is very telling, because if we put everything together, less men go to college, less access to economic mobility, then you cannot participate in being the provider that the world told you to be, which means guess what happens? More people are in danger. There's more intimate partner violence that is going to be happening. There is death that is going to be happening because of the ways in which that men feel as if they were not nurtured in these last few years under this administration. And it's been going on for a while now. But I will trace it back for me is to the pandemic when all of this stuff started to happen. Those arguments around $200 dates, those arguments around what should a woman be doing? What should a man be doing? Do we want to have a woman who is publicly lauded and a man who has to understand how to take the back seat? All of these cultural pieces added up to why men did not vote or voted for Trump. And again, I am not going to put the blame on black men. It actually doesn't make sense to put the blame on any of us for the most part. There now, no nigga, some of y'all, I think who was it? Vermont, Illinois, somebody. What black men definitely turned out a little bit more. North Dakota, some shit like that. But that's not the same to say necessarily for cities, right? And so I look at this a lot of the time and I worry because the strategy of what comes next means that in these next 4 years, we need to get engaged in education that nurtures men, right? Nurtures the male identity. Because right now, if they were able to convince themselves that they are not worthy of protection, that they are not worthy of being considered, then that's the thing. And again, this is to say straight men specifically have an issue. The Democratic Party also does not understand that the working man wants to be able to provide, and those simple things are not being validated. That's the reality. And that's what I am concerned around more and more as we are engaging in this conversation, because I think it's so simple, but in reality, and again, it's not something I necessarily care to have to agree with, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm like, nah, dog, like we we voted and now we have to worry around so many civil rights being taken. Murder at the border, women attempting to get abortions that are not going to be medically supported, having to go from state to state, the fact that queer folks will probably not be able to adopt children, get married. Trans folks are going to be under attack more and more because there's no gender affirming care going on. And the fact that niggas voted against reproductive rights, which includes paid family medical leave, right? All of this plays a role in terms of what's going to happen, because I think once we start to see that, we are now going to move into an era where people are going to be even more angry when they realize that their vote for Trump meant a vote for them to stay in their place and also fall further down, right? That economic stratification is getting larger and larger and larger, and black folks are going to feel it the fucking most. That's what I'm angry about. I'm angry around the access to college. I'm angry around the access to ensuring that for us as black people, we know that we can equate our economic mobility is equated to a college degree. That's a reality. We live 10 years longer simply off of having a 4-year degree. But when you make those opportunities inaccessible, when you make those opportunities even more difficult, when you have somebody who wants to eradicate the Department of Education, which means those Pell Grants are out of the door, the funding that can go into ensuring that kids can get money and scholarships and grants goes away. That's the piece right there that I don't know if people are talking around. That's the piece right there that is going to anger so many people. That's what's going to end up being the result of people voting for Trump, because out of a reaction of wanting to be validated culturally. Because honestly, Trump did not even lay out any policies that were for men that would benefit men, because that's not the reality. What just happened with the tariffs? People are no longer getting their Christmas bonuses because guess what? Those jobs are not going to be there anymore. And so I think as I reflect on this election and when I think around some of the downfalls of the Democratic Party and in terms of what was going on here, I think it is going to always be important to just note, in order for us to be able to survive, we need a way to target men in a way that makes more sense, which means there needs to be education that happens for, particularly, I'm thinking around like younger kids who are going to vote in the next 4 years. How do we begin to nurture them? How do we begin to decolonize the ways in which that social media can also play a role in this? Because from a content standpoint, they're scrolling and they're hearing this messaging passively. They're hearing it consistently because they're not going to put my content to the top of the thing. They're not going to put FDs to the top all the time. They will put somebody who's a little bit more willing to engage in rage bait, willing to engage in nonsensical conversation, because these are attached to feelings. These are not attached to policy necessarily. It's attached to identity. It's not attached to policy at all, right? It's attached to power. It's not attached to policy. Trump didn't have to articulate any of that shit. What he knew how to do was tell the story that you are not a happy American and I am going to get you what you need. So to be fully honest, to keep it a full bean, I don't trust non-black people right now. I don't bang with them right now. I'm not worried about white women trying to show solidarity with these blue things. Like that was what y'all did with the pussy hats. None of that matters. Y'all did not learn any of your lessons. I'm not concerned about that right now. What I am concerned around are the black children that are going to be impacted through this education. The people I'm concerned around are poor and working class families that are going to be impacted because when these jobs don't exist. I'm genuinely concerned for those of us who want to see good in the world but know that it's not coming soon enough. And so I bring this back because I'm unsurprised, I'm angry, and in some cases I'm a little numb. Right? I don't know if right now, for this particular episode, I didn't have anything necessarily productive to say in the most profound way to say it. It was just an opportunity to really just think out loud and process the things that I have been seeing and my frustrations that have been going on and what this means to fight for another 4 years. Because when I first was elected, I was in college. I was a junior in college, and I just realized the antagonism and emboldened white people that made life significantly harder. We don't think around the slow drip of capitalism and these oppressive policies, but we do see those immediate reactions. And so I am concerned around Muslim people. I am concerned around black people. I am concerned around visibly queer folks, because there's an attack on livelihood. There's an attack on humanity. And frankly, we're going to have to work and pivot even harder than before. So I know for me, I'm participating in the Working Families Party and ensuring that there are policies that make sense, because I do think we are now in the conditions that force people to have to be as radical as possible, because their radical beliefs are going to lead to their survival. People will benefit off of our progressive movements. This is where it's going to be extremely evident, right? And it's what they're going to need. And I'll be honest, right now I'm in a space of like, I'm going to be annoyed that there are people who are going to benefit off the fruits of our labor, but in that same fruits of our labor, they're going to be able to still talk shit because you voted against me. So no, I don't have it for Trump supporters. I don't look for anybody who is trying to see the humanity in somebody else. I actually don't agree with any of that. You made an active decision, essentially, to not love thy neighbor. And that's the reality. People move selfishly. People are going to continue to move selfishly. But part of my job is to maintain hope. Not naive hope, but maintain hope that we will survive this next 4 years, because Trump he's going to go beyond that, right? So I do believe that as Democrats have to think around their next moves and how this next election is going to function, you gotta bring men into the room. You gotta bring white men into a room. That's a reality. A white male candidate is gonna have to be the next person in order to win. That's a sad reality. So I finish up with this in the reality that I will do my best to take care of Black folks. I will continue to create space. I will continue to create pockets of joy, but also recognizing like my joy is not going to solely get me to survive. I need us to be able to mobilize in ways in which that will benefit the future. We need to be forward thinking. We need to ensure that folks who are expecting us to lay down and die, I don't want that for us. I'm not going to engage in the xenophobia. I'm not going to engage in any of that nonsense. What I am going to engage in is a radical imagination to know that we are going to be okay. We're going to be all right. That's what I can engage in right now. Other pieces, I want us to also just be mindful. I don't think Black women right now I think Black women need rest. They deserve rest. That's what I also believe. And so I stand here and, well, I'm sitting, but you know what I meant. I sit here and I'm thinking around how Black women were all able to respond in this moment as a collective, and it is okay. It's absolutely fine. They deserve it. What I think we continue to do as men, in order to combat this angry young man that is going to be very apparent, and which has made themselves very apparent, is to continue to mentor, is to continue to nurture, is continue to engage in community and push and think around love as an act of accountability and affirmation. That's going to be important moving forward in this election. Well, not even an election, in a Trump administration, right? This era is going to push us. It is going to kill people. It is going to make life fundamentally and materially more difficult. We will never be okay with that. We need to understand that these conditions are unfair. We need to understand that these conditions are not meant for us, but we are going to continue to fight like hell. At least that's what I'm able to do on my end. So, yeah, man. I'm done on this end. I just wanted to engage in this conversation a little bit more. And I'm going to have much more productive episodes, but this is really just an opportunity to like openly process with my audience and just kind of see where I am at. But know that I'll have a much more articulate thought and ways in which that there feels like there are political strategies and not necessarily just like a cultural analysis of things in order to ensure that we're good. But one thing I will leave with is that Democrats need to tell the stories of working people. The celebrity and the influencer era is no longer valid. We need real people. We need people that are not paid for. We need people who are willing to push. We need people who are willing to articulate the things that they need. We need people who are willing to listen to the concerns of the people and articulate that stuff into policy, into education, and into movement building. This is the time to do it. So I urge everybody, maintain hope, because without it, it will kill you. I appreciate y'all. I will see y'all next time. Peace.